Hey guys, it's Rachel from Tiramar Farms, and today I'm going to show you how to make leather breeches. So leather breeches are basically a very early, maybe even a little bit primitive means of dehydrating your green beans. So that's a way to preserve them without canning them and without freezing them. Instead, you're going to be dehydrating them. This is kind of an Appalachian tradition. I'm sure that people in other areas have done it as well. I'm not actually sure if my grandparents have done it. I need to ask them. We're not from Appalachia, but my grandparents, some of them are actually from the Ozarks, so a different mountain range. But basically all you're doing is stringing up your string beans. So I'm going to show you how to do that. All you're going to need are your green beans, thread. Thicker thread will work better, but if all you have is this kind of thread, then that's fine. A little bit thicker would work a little bit better though. And a large needle. So I'm just using that one there. You're going to want to double your string. So measure out about how long you want your line to be, and then just double that. And then break off your string. You're going to double the string to give it more stability and to make it a little bit thicker. Now my two ends, I have one end that is in a loop, which I'm going to use to hang them up with later. And one end I'm going to tie into a couple of knots. And try to get your second knot over the first knot as much as you can to make it thicker. So try to center it over the first knot as you're pulling it tight. So now we have a nice thick little knot that's going to be more stable on the end of our beans. You do need a needle with a wider eye so that this part can fit through it. And you're just going to pull it through your needle and give yourself extra, just as if you were sewing. Now, the beans themselves, you're going to want to snap them into 2 or 3 sections depending on how long they are. First, snap off each end so that you have 2 raw edges, and then this is kind of a shorter bean, so I'm just going to do him in 2. Then we're going to thread up through him, pull it through to our knot, and then to give this last piece more stability, I'm going to wrap around it once, so it's wrapped completely around it. I'm going to come up through the bottom, in between that thread, straight back up. Then I'm going to try to come out the other side through the thread as well. And that just makes a nice little loop on the end of this, and that's going to give it more stability. So now that we have our bottom one on, I lost my other piece somewhere in it. I'll find it later. So I'm going to take another one and snap off each end. Then this one has a little bit of a bug bite. So what I'm going to do is snap on either side and discard the bug bitten part. We only want the fresh, clean beans on our leather breeches, and then we're just going to keep going up. And so you keep going up like this all the way up to the top of your string. I know that some people prefer to eat their green beans a little bit longer. They prefer to leave them maybe whole even, or they might prefer to cut them but leave this end on. You would probably be okay leaving on this end. You do not want to leave on this end. This end is not edible. This little bottom part there, or top part technically, where it was attached to the bean plant, you definitely want to snap that one off. Just in my family personally, we've always snapped our beans anyway. but you want them to be in smaller, uniform pieces. They're gonna dehydrate better that way, because if you leave them as a whole bean, it's going to be a lot bigger. And in addition to being bigger, it's not going to have these open ends, so it's going to hold more moisture. The risk with these is of them molding. I've never had that happen, but I do know, I've seen where other people they've tried to do the leather britches and they've molded before they dehydrated. And part of preventing that is going to be having them in fairly equal pieces. They're not going to be perfect because the beans are not perfect and they're not all going to be even, but trying to get them as even as possible is going to ensure that they're all dehydrating at a fairly even rate instead of some of them drying out before other ones. And then opening up these ends is going to let more moisture escape, because the majority of the moisture is going to be inside the bean. So as it's dehydrating, if it has more opening to dry out, and this is just my opinion, but I feel like it's going to dehydrate a lot better with that opening rather than if you try to string them up as whole beans. Also, the person that originally taught me how to do it said that if you leave any end of the bean that has touched the blossom, so that would be this end where it's attached to the plant, then it will spoil. As the beans get a little bit longer, they're going to get a little bit heavier, so be sure as you're holding it, whenever you string a bean, kind of grab this so that this part is not, your little extra part is not slipping all the way through. And if it gets really heavy, I found that kind of clamping it behind with my fingernail, if it's getting really heavy and wanting to slip, sliding the bean on and then clamping with the fingernail works really well to prevent that. But that's the basic process, and what you're going to end up with is long strings of beans like this. You want to hang these in a dark and dry place and cool if possible. You don't want to hang them in a wet place or a place that's really humid if you can help it, because that humidity is going to increase the surface moisture on the beans, and that's going to promote mold and spoilage. I want them hanging somewhere dark, because the sunlight, although it's not going to spoil them, it's going to suck out more of the nutrients, and you'll end up with dry, ugly beans who don't have much green left at all, and the sun's basically going to just degrade the product a little bit. You can actually use the sun to dehydrate things, but if you were doing that, you would be using the sun just itself for a certain period of time and then storing them in a dark place. So you definitely want the long-term storage to be in a cool, dry, dark place. And now I'm going to go show you some that I've done before to show you what the aging process looks like for these. This is where I'm storing my leather britches as they're dehydrating. This is just a little extra closet we have in our house that we use to hold our like jams and jellies and canned fruits and stuff. And then I'm also hanging these up in it because it's really the best place I could think of in our house. It's going to be routinely dark. It's not opened very often, and it's going to be dry as well and pretty cool. So that's why I chose in here. But just to kind of show you the progression, these are leather britches, and I'm sorry the lighting is not really great. It is a dark closet, so not the best lighting, but these are leather britches that I did a few months ago. They're completely dehydrated. They're completely dry, and they did retain a lot of the green because they were stored out of the sunlight, out of the light, and in a dark place. So this is what they look like when they're completely finished. They're totally dry. There was no spoilage. There was no mold. They're just dry, dehydrated beans, ready to be rehydrated and eaten if that was what I wanted to do. But I don't really have a mess of these yet. These are just a few strings that I did actually at the Appalachian Homestead, the Great Appalachian Homesteading Conference. So that's where I did these, and they're completely dry now. These came from our garden, and I did these, a couple weeks ago, or maybe just 1 week ago, I think. But anyway, the point is I did these really recently. They are not completely dry yet. They're starting to shrivel, but you can see that they're definitely not completely dry. They're still kind of soft. There's no mold, there's no spoilage. They're just shriveling and dehydrating. So those are our leather britches, and I'm about to go sit down and make a whole bunch more. We have planted actually we've planted 2 more crops of green beans, but they haven't started to make yet. So we're at this kind of in between stage where there's not really enough to make it worth a can, but there is enough to do this. So this is a great way to dehydrate them. And also I just find it kind of fun. I've always liked snapping beans and shelling peas, and this is just another thing to do with my hands. And also just because I've always thought it was cool to do stuff like this, to step back in time and do something the way that our ancestors did. If it was good enough for them, it's good enough for me. So anyway, thanks for watching. Be sure to subscribe down below, and you can follow me on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter at Tiramar Farms, all those places. And I will see y'all again next time.